I'm not wearing the bracelet. I haven't for a month because it fell off. I think it was disgraceful the way it was described today. It's actually known as the Scarlet Thread of Hope. It promotes hope, safety, and success. The thread was tied around the grave of the wife of Jacob, who was Rachel in the Bible, and is something that's been passed down through the years. I didn't do anything to make a mockery of this tradition. Thousands of people go in the early spring, as I did, to pray at the grave of Rabbi Jacob Joseph, who came to this country from Europe in the 19th century and was really the chief rabbi, the first one ever. He established the standard for kosher foods. Many people worship him, and I thought it was absolutely outrageous to make a mockery of it by trying to exploit it through me today. I thought that I rarely say this, but I think the Daily News owes those in the Hasidic community who go to that gravesite and who to wear it as it's the same as throwing dung on a cross or stamping on the Star of David, and I think it's unacceptable.
Governor, when did you start wearing it?
Probably in early April when I went to this observance, and I was touched by it. I was touched by the observance, and they asked me would I like to wear the scarlet thread, and I certainly was willing to, the same way you would wear pins or buttons commemorating other events.
When did it fall off? During the budget legislation?
It fell off somewhere in late June. I know it was before the vetoes.
Governor, do you know yet, have you made a decision as to whether you're going to sign the stop and frisk database bill?
Well, I got some additional information from Commissioner Kelly yesterday, and I looked at it with State Senator Martin Golden and the sponsors of the bill, Assemblyman Hakeem Jeffries and State Senator Eric Adams. We looked at the additional data all night, and we'll come to a decision as soon as we can.
How tough of a decision is this? You made some tough ones over the past year. This must be pretty difficult.
Well, the additional information provided for a little longer time than, but we're still within a 10-day period to sign the legislation or veto it. It's a piece of legislation that manifests a lot of interest on both sides, but it is not about the ability of the police to stop and frisk, which we applaud, and it's also not about lowering crime, which the police have done very well. It's about whether or not the information that is derived from people who are stopped and not arrested would be used in future investigations.
What do you think? Tell us about the legislation that was signed today.
It's a privacy rights issue, is it not?
Well,
a database with hundreds of thousands of people, personal information in on those people, and they've done nothing wrong.
Well, it's a privacy rights issue, but it's also an issue as to whether or not the police department can maintain that data after they had a reasonable suspicion after stopping someone.
What do you think of Ray Kelly's concession or compromise they made that he would allow for the data to be erased after 1 year?
Well, I thought that was interesting. We talked about it yesterday. I asked Commissioner Kelly. He could do that, and I think people have applauded Commissioner Kelly and revere him. He was the one that originally lowered the crime rate in New York State under Dinkins, and then came back and over the last 8 years has lowered the crime rate significantly, even after it was lowered during the Giuliani administration. And I thought it was a noble concession. The question I asked him is what happens when the next police commissioner tries to reverse it. He doesn't believe that that would happen in a political atmosphere such as what exists in New York City. But many people don't believe that this would have been allowed to go on the way it has in New York City as it is. So it's just a decision that we're going to have to ponder over the next couple of days and come to a conclusion.
And are you convinced at this point?
What kind of teeth do you have in that legislation to make sure that there's no further delay and that we're not just dealing with so-called best efforts, that we're really dealing with people?
Well, we have a chief diversity officer now, and the chief diversity officer will speak to all the state agencies. The public authorities and state agencies will list their compliance on their annual report, so there'll be great amount of transparency in the process.
And just back to the stop and frisk legislation, Ray Kelly has said that if you veto it, or I'm sorry, if you sign the legislation, that crime would go up. Do you buy that argument?
I don't know one way or the other that that's the case. First, we have to determine whether or not the evidence is actually a viable tool in crime investigation. I think it's very important at this point not to scare people. Somebody said something about Muhammad Atta was in New York in the late 90s, and had we had information on him, it might have prevented the terrible attack on our country on September 11th. But I think that is really exaggerating the issue. I don't know if Muhammad Atta was ever stopped or if he was doing anything wrong at the time that he was in New York State. We do not need to alarm people based on this legislation. There are privacy issues, there are civil rights issues, there are law enforcement issues, and there is the fact that there's a heightened fear of crime in New York City because almost on a weekly basis we have a terrorist threat.
And when do you expect
is this policy unfair to minorities, African Americans, and Latinos specifically?
Well, what we are doing is we're looking generally as to whether the policy is unfair. We're not looking to see whether it's unfair to any specific group.
And when do you expect to make a decision?
Thank you.